You're listening to the Sticks in the Six podcast. Here are your co-hosts, Andrew Forbes, Peter Baracchini, and Alex Hobson.
Well, good morning, folks, and welcome to episode 173 of Sticks in the Six. I'm your host, Andrew Forbes, here with my co-host, Peter Baracchini. And Peter, we're getting a little bit back used to these Sunday morning visits with each other, but it works out well. It works out decent.
It does, yeah.
Right?
I mean, there's nothing wrong with having, a couple morning epis every now and then. I know that, schedules are, they are what they are. Life gets in the way, but we always make the time to try and record it, no matter when, whether it's Saturday evening, Sunday morning. We always find the time. That's all that matters. And, again, it's I mentioned it last week. It is a bit of a throwback doing the Sunday morning epis in like the first 5-6 days of this pod. So again, the nostalgia effect is still real, even though this is the second time that we've done it in the recent weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll mention off the top of the show, I mentioned to you before we hit record, there might be a little bit of feedback. I'm not my normal setting, my normal cave. I'm here in the kitchen doing some dad duties as well. So I got the kids off to the left here. You might hear a little bit of feedback from them as well. But on top of that, it's great to be here. Obviously, Hockey Podcast Network. We're proud members of the Hockey Podcast Network, brought to you by DraftKings, BetterHelp, SeatGeek, and once again for season 5, Indie Ale House will be alongside the Sticks in the Six podcast. We got stuff unfolding on that end with the Sticks or with Indie Ale House. We've got some exciting things coming, some exciting news. So hopefully we'll have that for you in the coming weeks. But I got to tell you, we kicked off before we get into all the fun hockey news. We had our draft. We're going into the 14th year of my keeper fantasy league.
Ooh.
So for those of you who have listened along, Dauber, we were giving away fantasy hockey guides. One of the guys that received one of the fantasy hockey guides is in my keeper league. So we'll see how that plays out. That
There's
said,
gonna be a lot
he
of controversy there.
There's going to be some controversy. That said, he did put Connor McDavid up for trade this offseason. Connor McDavid was going to be a $20 purchase. We have a salary cap of $82. So every year, all your 10 keepers go up $1. Okay?
Interesting.
You have 10 minors in your system as well that don't go up $1. You can keep them in there until they play 82 games. So with all that said, I think actually it's changed to 100 games. But anyways, doesn't matter. With all that said, I made a trade. I picked up Connor McDavid. He's going to be $20. So he's eating up a quarter of my cap right off the hop. That said, I couldn't pass it up. I traded for the best player, and honestly, his fantasy points essentially make him a 2-player individual, right? Like you're getting 200 fantasy points from this guy every year. So that said, I traded Alexander Holtz, who seems to be playing as a third-line player for the Vegas Golden Knights this year. Maybe his development got hindered a little bit in New Jersey, as well as Steven Stamkos, who I had the last 2 years. I believe he was going to be about $13 this year, so still on the upper echelon of what you're paying for some of the players in this league. That said, I didn't know how he was going to work out in Nashville. He could go on to have one hell of a year in Nashville. And it's tough to give up a guy like Stamkos. He's, the guy's more loyal than the team he played for. So let's put it that way. He would go out there and probably put up some solid points, but I had to get Connor McDavid. So I got Connor McDavid. I then traded 3 picks, including a first round next year for Connor Hellebuyck in net. This could be the first year in 14 seasons that I finished top 3, and I'm hoping to hell that this is one of those years where I can finally put to rest the commissioner curse. I've given up commissioner duties to the guy who won the fantasy guide. So shout out Kyle. I hope you
someone else's problem.
Away I have. That's right. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm excited to get fantasy hockey underway. The regular season's right around the corner.
This is absolutely kind of funny because last year, in my fantasy league, I told you I made that trade. I had the 3rd pick. I traded up to get Connor McDavid, and I traded David Pastrnak and Elias Pettersson in the process. So 2 years back to back, both members of 6 and the 6 getting Connor McDavid in their fantasy leagues. It's actually absolutely kind of funny.
That's right. And on top of that, I should note too, it was the first year that we had a draft floor trade. First year we had a draft floor trade, and I was a part of it. I had the 5th overall pick for our rookie draft. The guy who's at 3rd, he wanted a particular player, and he was willing to take what I wanted at 3, if I could take what he wanted at 5, and give him another first-round pick next year. I've got a full run of my minors. So anyways, I ended up getting Tidge Aginla, 3rd overall in our fantasy in our rookie draft, and I can't even remember who I took for him. Anyways, doesn't matter. I took somebody for him, and it played out well in my favor, and I ended up getting William after as well. So there you go. There's one of the little gaffers there. So
joining in for a little guest appearance.
Joining in for a little guest appearance. So Peter, before we get into hockey, how you doing this week, buddy?
Doing great. Yeah, no, I mean, you went full into depth about fantasy hockey right now. None of my drafts have happened just yet, but it is going to be difficult to juggle both football pickets, 2 fantasy leagues, 2 separate ones. It's absolutely going to be fun because I've never done more than one every single year. So I'm going to see how well I can maintain my status of being, at least mid-tier to top tier in hockey with 2 drafts and also in my fantasy pickets, which is kind of odd because remember I was saying hopefully I could continue to going on in my survivor. Lost because of the Bucks. And I can't believe that I thought that they had a 22% chance or 22% of people picked. And I'm like, you know what? I got to. It seemed like a for sure fire bet. Nope. So I'm out of survivor. And last week was kind of bad in my pickets because I went from like top 3 to 10. So hopefully I can bounce back this week. At least some of the matchups are, they're going to be more favorable matchups as opposed to last week where there were kind of a lot of toss-ups. So we'll see what happens. But I'm doing great. Fantasy season's kicking in, as you mentioned. Hockey season's already in full swing with the preseason already underway. And yeah, just really excited to get started and talking about the Maple Leafs right now because it seems like we've been talking about off-season news, everything like that, but now we're actually talking about games. And whether it's preseason or not, it's so meaningful for the players. So I'm really excited to get into that.
Yeah, we should do a live update too about, we talked a couple weeks ago about what we're going to do with the fund or what we're going to do with the loss of Johnny Gaudreau and his brother Matthew. And we do want to give something back, albeit it's not a huge amount, but every dollar counts. We did extend that to preseason goals as well as playoff goals, hopefully, if the Leafs make the playoffs. I'm also extending that to anybody who listens, anybody who joins us on a weekly basis. If you want to match us or get involved alongside us, that would be awesome. You just let us know, reach out, DM us, whatever you want to do. But so far so good. The Leafs are having a decent preseason. We're going to get to that in a little bit. Before we do, I want to get into some of the rumors that have been surfacing. Obviously, the Leafs are in a situation right now where they've got to move something, right? There's this belief that obviously Easton Cowan's had an okay preseason. You also have Robertson, who's had a good preseason, which we'll talk to in just a moment here as well. But in saying that, there is some money finagling that they have to do if they want to sign a guy like Max Pacioretty, who we talked about last week. So the rumors seem to be centering around guys like David Kämpf, Calle Järnkrok, even thoughts of Ryan Reeves being maybe a victim of being bought out or having his contract, pushed aside. I want to get your thoughts on what's being talked about in terms of the movement that we could see with the Leafs prior to the season.
Yeah, and let's not forget about the fact that Connor Dewar and Yanni Hakanpää are on long-term injured reserve as well. So there's a little bit of pre-planning for the season, not just for Pacioretty right now, but for those players when they eventually come back and they're healthy. I know Dewar, he had a shoulder surgery. Hakanpää with his knee. So Hakanpää seems to be on the up and up, which is great, but you're going to have to worry about that later on. You're going to have to create some room. And I believe it was Darren Dreger who on TSN's First Up on 1050 both alluded to Järnkrok and David Kämpf's name, which in a perfect world, it's got to be one of those two players. I mean, it's a cap casualty, but at the same time, it's one where it's not necessarily damned if you do, damned if you don't, because you're going to lose a key part of a certain aspect of your team right there. We talked about David Kämpf and the defensive zone starts and being a face-off player. Calle Järnkrok, who could be a very solid third, middle six type player, 20-20 type of player. We've seen that in the past from him. So ultimately, it comes down to what's going to be one that you can manage in the long term that you could get in return right now. And as of right now, if you move David Kämpf, you're going to have that hole in the fourth line up the middle. You could easily put Pontus Holmberg there, but also if you have Steven Lorentz, who's looking pretty good on his PTO as well, is he going to be up the middle? And then when Dewar comes back, are you going to have Lorentz, Dewar, Reeves as your fourth line, which we haven't really seen. We haven't seen any game time, but on paper, it kind of looks decent. You got the speed of Dewar, you got the two-way ability of Lorentz, plus the physicality of Reeves. Really not much change there. If you're to move on from Järnkrok, you're going to lose a good chunk of offense. And there's already a crowd on the wing, as we already know. It looks like Pacioretty's going to get signed. He's looking pretty good, despite, the questions about his injury. He's looking healthy. If you move on from Järnkrok, you got goals from Pacioretty that could kind of alleviate that, but you still need a little bit more offense. And that's where, someone like Nick Robertson could come into the question, because he's looking pretty solid right now. And if you could play both left or right side, just like Järnkrok could be a very versatile player, you can move him around as, a top 9 type player. And if Järnkrok is gone, you at least have possibly another 20 goals to work with Nick Robertson. And we already not necessarily already talked about, but there's also Bobby McMahon, who had a good chunk of goals last season, especially he popped off in the second half. So if Nick Robertson can be that one of those secondary scorers that could be relied on, just like Järnkrok was in the past, that'll be a good add. And the major addition would be on the penalty kill, because both players see that time. It's going to be interesting to see, because they both have a cap hit. I think Calle Järnkrok is more favorable because it's 2.1 for a middle six player. I would take that any day of the week. But 2.4 for David Kämpf as a fourth line center. If Lorentz is going to come at a cheaper hit and you move on from him, then that seems more likely. And we've already talked about this. I know you're a big fan of his defensive zone starts and his ability to be up the middle of the ice. Same with me, but they're now in a real crunch because of that logjam up the middle and even on wing, which in essence is kind of a good thing to have at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I'm all for his defensive zone starts. I think, that's been well documented over the past couple of seasons. That said, I mean, I also understand where you're coming from with the cap hit, and we knew when he signed that contract, there's a lot of people saying, this is an iffy contract for the Leafs. Is it going to work out? And some question the $2.4 million cap hit, especially knowing that it's going into the 2026-27 season. So you've got him for another 3 seasons signed at that cap. That opens up the door to maybe him being the possible odd man out. And before, when we talked about when he signed this contract, he had one of his best offensive seasons as an NHL player. On top of that, he was maybe the best penalty killer in the NHL at that time as well. So there was a lot of need for that in the Leafs lineup. Leafs have since added to their penalty killing. Dewar's not a bad penalty killer. Steven Lorentz could be an interesting piece as well if they do get him in the lineup. Along with that, last season we saw Willie Nylander playing some penalty kill as well, which creates a little bit more speed in the on the offense and in the transition game when you're on the penalty kill as well, which could be a game changer this season on top of everything else. So if you had asked me last year,
add Austin Matthews into the equation too, because he was, I believe, the first game it was him and Marner on the PK as well.
Yeah. So if you had asked me last season, would I be willing to give up David Kämpf? I'd probably say not really. This season, I'm a little bit more leaning towards he's an available asset, right? And maybe teams out there are going to want to trade for somebody who's under contract. And right now, he's under contract for another, like I said, another 3 seasons. Why would you not go for that now? On top of that, to kind of get in the Calle Järnkrok discussion as well, the interesting piece for him is, yes, he's added some offense. Yes, he's a great depth player for the Leafs. The problem with Calle Järnkrok has been his health as well. So we saw at the tail
Especially
end of
as of
last
late.
season, he was out for some time. He missed an extended period of time. So that can play into it as well. And he is another guy that's under contract. He is an asset that the Leafs could possibly move. And he does have that offensive push that he can provide any team as well. So he is an asset that a team looking to make make a push could see in their lineup as well. And that is saying that, this is all under the idea that the Leafs signed Pacioretty, the Leafs signed Steven Lorentz, Durham Hakanpää start the season on long-term IR, then there's a lot of moving pieces here, and I think that's what we're going to have to look at. But as for the rumors right now, I can't see Revo going anywhere, especially after that fight in the first preseason game. He's a team guy, right? And he's a dressing room guy. And you talk to any player. I mean, even Pacioretty came in and said he's one of the greatest teammates he's ever had, going back to Vegas. So, do you move a guy when this is a team that 2 seasons ago you had Ryan O'Reilly leaving, saying, there's a possible culture issue in that dressing room, whether he said it or not. I mean, that was the speculation at the time, but I don't see them moving on from a guy that adds that kind of flair in the dressing room, keeps the team together. So, anyways, moving on from the rumors, we have to talk about Nick Robertson. I just came out with a new piece over at the Hockey Writers called "Mulling the Maple Leafs." It's where I can give a little bit more opinion, a little bit more of a column, more than just a standard article. But my first piece in that series was about whether it's Cowan or Robertson. And right now, I think anybody would be foolish not to think that Robertson has outdueled Cowan in the all-around preseason. He's got 3 goals in the last 2 games, 2 of which are game winners. He's looked incredibly good on the defensive side of the puck as well. Obviously, the steal led to his game winner 3 nights ago. The one maybe mishap is him pushing Nylander to the ground with his stick, which was completely an errant mistake. And the ice, as Nylander says, yes, as I think we all collectively held our breath when that happened, right? Like,
Yeah.
But I think the one thing that was the one maybe mishap of his whole preseason so far, and I think right now Robertson is coming out on top. I want to get your thoughts on that.
I guess she agrees too.
What are your thoughts on that, Peter? Thoughts on Robertson so far?
He, like you said, he has been the best. I'm not going to call him a prospect because he's way past that label, but the best player that's fighting for one of those spots right now. Coming into the preseason, it was always going to be the focus on Nikita Grabenkin, Easton Cowan, Nick Robertson, and all that. So the way that he's able to take this opportunity, as we've said many times before, where he was able to just try and get that opportunity from Craig Berube, it was always a talking point where he wanted that opportunity. And to basically get signed, come into camp, and make sure that everything was going properly, I think that's boding well for him right now. In the instance where he's getting those game times, let's hope that he could get more opportunity on the power play. He's getting those chances at 5-on-5. He's got the shot already. You mentioned his takeaway. We're going to mention his play against Montreal last night in his most recent game, where he scored both goals. So he's been on the catalyst of 3 of the last 3 Maple Leafs goals as a result of that. So he's battling. We've said that there is no better opportunity for him as a Maple Leaf than right now, and he's seeing that. he came into camp with a chip on his shoulder, and he's just playing lights out hockey. You talked about how he's evolving his game on the other side of the puck, where he's able to hunt down those loose pucks, battle, grind it out, be a hound on the puck. It's very great to see that if he's able to add that element consistently, we know he has a speed, he has a tenacity. If he's able to get on the forecheck, that's going to be great for him. And yeah, I just can't really say any more good things about his play right now, because if there was anybody that needed to step it up, it was definitely him. This whole entire talk about him wanting to move has been following him all season long. And now that he's more likely solidified a spot on the roster, it's definitely something that's going to build his confidence for this entire season. It could lead to a better contract, maybe a 3-year, multi-year deal kind of thing after the season's up, because he's able to run away with it and he's going to have a spot on the roster. So if that's the case, great. And I just want to chime in on the Nylander push kind of thing. I mean, we've seen many, many players do it, give that little like extra push. I just think it was bad timing because Nylander was already in full swing. He was already in full speed. He was already back checking. Just didn't quite feel the need for Robertson to push him, but it's happened many times before. It was just a bad outcome. So overall, aside from that, you can't say any more great things about Robertson's preseason, because he's taking that opportunity right now and running away with it compared to other prospects that were, breathing down his shoulder basically. So good on him, and great chance for him to take that spot.
Yeah, I mean, he's done everything right. And I don't know if you saw the article that came out from Joshua Cloak over at The Athletic, where he talked with Robertson and basically said, like, Robertson knew that he was going to be back in Toronto. Like, he had this, it's almost like a stance that he took. Yeah, and he had to play the game that was being played with him, right? And he had confidence in himself. And that's the one thing you have to say about this kid. Injuries aside, this kid is confident. He knows what he can do. He knows what he's able to do. He did note that one thing that has changed since junior, he's had to learn how to adapt and change at the NHL level versus junior level, and it's a different way that he has to go about that kind of development, right? Sorry, you're gonna hear a little feedback here from my daughter. She's playing with some toys here, but it's kind of like David Alter with his dog. David Alter with his dog. I got my daughter. So, anyways, yeah. So my big thing with Robertson right now is just to continue what he's doing. I think he's doing everything the right way. Another big change for him has been the way that he's been able to adapt his release, right? And we saw this. One of the biggest things about Matthews, he's a pure goal scorer. One of the biggest things about him is his release, his ability to get it off quick snapshot. Robertson seems to be the other way, right? He's a quick wrister. You saw it last night on that second goal where he went 5-hole. Yeah, catch and release. He went 5-hole with Caden Primo, and I think that just kind of goes to show you that he's learned what he's able to do. But on top of that, like I mentioned off the top, we've seen a better 200 from this guy. And as a 23-year-old, there's still so much room to grow. But this kid is getting it, and he's starting to learn, and he's starting to adapt. And now he's on that prove it deal. And I talked about it last week. What's his face over at Daily Faceoff? He's talking about the fact that there's a possibility that we could still see Robertson moved before the season starts. And Frank Saravelli, just late night. Yeah. Names are passing by me.
It's all good. It's all good.
I don't see that being the case. I don't see Robertson, the player, signing a deal for $875,000 just to be traded to a possibly non-contender. Yes, she agrees with me. She doesn't think Nick Robertson's going anywhere. So there you have it. Harlow's got it. She's our insider today.
Harlow the insider. I don't think, love it.
Harlow the insider. But no, I don't see him. I just don't see him signing for that and then possibly being traded non-contender without an opportunity. And now he's developed the position that he's at with the organization. They know what he can offer. He knows what he can offer the organization. Why would the Leafs go and sign to that minimal contract, have him as a possible depth option at $875,000 just to be like, see you later, best of luck because you requested a trade? Many players have asked for a trade and things have worked out, in other directions. Jake DeBrusk's a guy I think about. He played another couple seasons with Boston before he ended up in Vancouver. So,
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of possibility there, and I just see that being a report that follows through. But that's just me.
I was just about to say,
go
let's
ahead.
not forget the role that, Berube has played in all this too, where he has talked with Robertson. There is that chance where, a different system and a different play style could benefit to Robertson. And we're seeing that right now with just the team as a whole, where Berube's roster or Berube style play is actually translating to what we're seeing right now. So let's not forget about him, because he's been one of the main voices in pushing Robertson to be at his best, to take that next step. And with a new system, with a new coach, with a new voice, you're seeing that right now.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that's so important because we got a taste of what Berube means to a team. And everyone sees him as this tough kind of mentality. But this is the second instance where he's gone in and talked to a guy that maybe is on the verge of being out of Toronto. We saw the coffee gate with Mitch Marner, where nobody knows what the heck was talked about, but him and Mitch Marner met up
Except him
at a
and
local
Mitch.
cafe. Him and Mitch, that's right. And the flies on the wall, that's it. But and then of course Robertson going out there and saying, "Look, kid, you got an opportunity here. You got to run with it. I think you're going to do okay. We're going to give you the best opportunity that you can have." And I think that's so important to have a guy like that in your corner. On top of that, your assistant coach now is Mark Savard, a guy who's been there, a guy who knows what it's like to face adversity and what does he need to do to try and get into the lineup. And I think that's another important role. I'm going to call him a role player because he's a player in the whole cog, right? But a role player on the team is Mark Savard. So I think that's important as well to note. But just there's so much going on with this. I can't see Robertson not starting. And as I said in my predictions earlier in the offseason, if Robertson plays a consistent, like last season, he averaged 11-23 in 56 games. If this kid plays 75 games, let's say 15 minutes a game, let's even call it 13 minutes a game, I'm telling you now, he's going to be scoring between 20 and 25 goals. There's absolutely no question. There's absolutely no question. So I think that's worth considering as well. I think he's going to, he's gotten for what he can do with his shot now, and I think that's so important. But it'll be fun to watch, and that's kind of ties back into our first point of where's the money coming from. There's going to be a lot of movement because this kid, if he does go on to have an incredible season, then the Leafs are looking at signing him once again next offseason, which could be an interesting battle between both sides. So that said, before we get into our next point, just a quick word from one of our sponsors over at the DraftKings Sportsbook. TD, Tutty in the 6, touchdowns, touchdowns matter more at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. We don't care how they score them. We want them to be. We want to bet on touchdowns, and DraftKings Sportsbook is delivering. I'm having a rough go here today, Peter.
It's totally fine. We all have them. We all have them. It's all good.
Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your first pick. Now, I don't have picks made yet for today. That said, I do have a future I just took out last night for the Dallas Stars to go on and win the Stanley Cup. I know it's not the Maple Leafs, but I had to, I want to make a little bit of cash this year. And so far, the Leafs have let me down in the past 30 years. So we'll see what happens. But they were paying 12 times your money, so 12, throw a little junk money on there and see what happens. But ready to do a touchdown dance of your own? New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the Sportsbook app and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets. When you bet just $5, only at DraftKings Sportsbook, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort, Kansas. 21 plus age and eligibility varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/ftball. So, we got to get into the preseason here. We've had, 3 or 4 games now. By far the most interesting was last night against the Montreal Canadiens. So it's kind of good that we did our episode this morning. We can get into that a little bit deeper. But before we get into the Montreal game, what have you seen thus far in the preseason that you like? What have you seen that you don't quite like with the Maple Leafs?
What I don't like first is how the first game was basically a repeat of what we saw last season. Now, it was the very first game. It was everybody shaking off the rust. It was against the Ottawa Senators, where our Stars didn't quite have the best start. And we had to claw our way back to force overtime. And it was a poor breakdown in overtime that led to the game-winning goal by Calle Järnkrok, which is basically encompassing most of the games last season. But I'm willing to forgive that because it was only one game in preseason, not the regular season. It's not, game 42 where we're at the halfway point and you should have learned your lesson thing. Berube made his comments very clear. Like, they were very slow. Like you could tell it was the very first game. I think they just need to find that consistency going forward. And that to me is just one area of improvement. But the main thing is, and I've even recently wrote about this, is how they're translating their play from practice and using Berube's system, power play, or even from the assistant coaches, power play PK is translating well to the regular season. I mean, preseason games right now, where, you're seeing that commitment to helping on the back check. You're not giving up a whole lot of odd man rushes. There's not a lot of chances off the rush where you're taking up the lanes. You're basically perfect on the penalty kill in the preseason right now. I think Toronto went 7 for 7 on the penalty kill last night. And even before then, they killed off every single penalty that they faced, which, shows that added level of aggression where Lane Lambert is translating that to how they want to kill the penalty and be a factor when they're down a man. Power play, it's looking much better. I think that there's less predictability right now, and I think they still need to continue doing that because last year it was just predictable as all hell. Drop pass, everything like that. Didn't quite see a whole lot of drop passing, which is really good. Because, again, that was one of the more predictable things that we've seen. Seeing Mitch Marner back on kind of that off wing, making those passes, making those plays, because we saw that one deflection off John Tavares and in. That was absolutely perfection. And I really thought that maybe he's starting to find his confidence in being that setup man where he's trying to be deceptive from the point. I think there's a lot to like. I think you want to see a little bit more offensive production because after that Ottawa game, it was very low scoring, not necessarily low event hockey because it was certainly eventful, but they managed to hold their own in key situations. They managed to hold the lead where maybe last year they faltered under pressure. They weren't that great defensively, but now you have capable defensemen that could shut things down properly. I think that's a good thing for them going forward because, it's only preseason. It was a 2-1 game against, an AHL roster against an NHL roster for both sides even. But if they're able to do that, that's a whole lot of confidence for regulars that are going to be on the roster next season or this season coming up. Where if you're going to face those tough situations, you're going to have to dial in and you're going to have to dig deep. And they managed to do that very well. There's 2 more games remaining, so I'm interested to see how that's going to carry over. But you're starting to see a lot of great things from the Maple Leafs right now in terms of their overall play, their structure, the commitment, the ability to shut things down. It's really great to see right now. And I think Berube and his staff is having a whole lot of, influence on that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, like we said, we're getting a chance to see kind of what we have, and we have to understand too that first game, it's a new system. We're learning new things about what this team's going to be playing like. Berube does tend to have a little bit more of a defensive mindset when he comes in. So I think that all plays into it as well. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see where it goes. I think thus far, I think the Leafs have had a decent preseason. They're working out the quirks, which is exactly what you want to do. That's what the preseason is all about, is just finding a way to work out the quirks. They've pulled out players when they've been feeling stiff. We've seen Austin Matthews leave the game. We've seen John Tavares leave the game. We've seen, obviously, William Nylander leave the game. So they are being very precautionary with a lot of these players, which is nice to see as well. And they're giving some of these young players a chance. We saw a bunch of them last night, and we're going to get into that right now, but we saw a bunch of them last night really kind of step up and play against some of the bigger players on the Montreal Canadiens, which, you know, although Montreal's had a rough seasons here, this is still a team that's got a lot of talent. It's got a lot of big bodies. It's got a lot of, you talk about even Kirby Dach. He's a big kid. That is a big, solid body that you're going up against. You got Josh Anderson. Arbor Jackeye is another guy that obviously you see as well. So for the Leafs to have those young guys go up against some of these players, I'm pretty sure I'm getting a Dennis Hildeby tattoo at some point because I love this guy. I absolutely love this guy. I've said it since day one. I mean, you can circle back to like episode 3 of this podcast, and I'm sure I mentioned Dennis Hildeby. This kid is going to be good, and I'm telling you, like, I would be shocked if we didn't see him at some point this season. I'd be shocked. What he did last night against the Montreal Canadiens, yeah, he gave up one late. It was a 6-on-5. Kirby Dach open at the side of the net. But this guy's been an absolute beast for the Leafs in net in the preseason. He played the full 60 minutes last night. He looked phenomenal. So shout out to Hildeby. That might be the next Leafs jersey that I put up on the wall. We'll see. But he's one hell of a player, and I'm excited to see him play on a regular basis with this Leafs team in the coming years. If I'd like to say that Joseph Woll's going to work out, I hope he works out. Another in organizational development goalie. But if he doesn't, and we have to kind of sit back and wait for, you've got Hildeby coming, you've got Akti Almov coming, you've got Vyacheslav Peksa coming, you got this, the new kid they drafted this year as well. I mean, he's had a decent start to his season as well. The Leafs are finally getting some goalie prospects, and this is going to look so good in the next couple of years. So I think that's been my biggest takeaway. But last thing before we cut it here, it's going to be a bit of a shorter episode. There's not a ton to talk about, especially with the season right around the corner. But the Leafs against Montreal last night. Now, these two teams meet to open up the season. Patrick Laine, I know we talked about it in the Slack chat for the Hockey Writers. Patrick Laine, that was a terrible knee on knee. And I know Darren Dreger broke it down on TSN that he felt like it wasn't intentional. Pare came out after and he said, it wasn't intentional. I was trying to stand him up and obviously, extended the knee, and you never like to see the knee bend that way. It's not supposed to bend that way. And especially for a player like Patrick Laine coming off of what he went through last season with the player assistance program, mental health issues. We're big advocates for mental health. So to see that come out and be against a guy like Patrick Laine who's just trying to get his career back on track, it was heartbreaking. Like it was, I think any hockey fan can agree it was heartbreaking. I know you mentioned that Pare should get suspended. I mean, he may, like, it might be a couple games. My biggest thing, and this is not a Leafs lover against a Montreal team that I hate. I actually love the way that Arbor Jackeye plays the game, but how Bertuzzi-esque was that punch to Pare's head when he came up beside him? And those are the exact things. I get that testosterone and frustrations and the wires cross, and we hear about it all the time, how sometimes you just go blackout and you do the first thing you possibly think of. That might have been the dumbest play he could have done. That might have been the dumbest play that Arbor Jackeye could have done. And to blindside a guy like that, your glove on,
Sucker punching him multiple times.
Yeah, I mean, like even after Parry's down the ground and he's got his hands over his head and I mean, call it a turtle, but like he wasn't ready for it. A turtle only happens if you're face to face with the guy and you're knowing that it's coming. Parry had no idea that this was going to be as explosive as it was, and I get it. Jack Guy was standing up for a teammate that they were everyone in Montreal is excited to see Patrick Laine play, and it did not look good. But in retaliating against that, like I don't see how there's not supplemental discipline here for Robert Xhekaj.
Yeah, no, fully agree. And again, there was probably, I mean, obviously Perez said there was no intent. You could tell that he was trying to go for the body, but it was a very, very tough situation. And they even mentioned it on the broadcast here. I think it was O-Dog, where kind of similar to a stick being careless and you get someone up in the face with a high stick and all that. You got to be responsible with that. In the essence, you got to be responsible with the positioning of where your body is. Then again, it was a very crowded situation where 3 players were converging on Laine, and Prey kind of stepped up where maybe he should have backed off a little bit considering how vulnerable he was, and then it was a knee on knee. There definitely should have been a penalty. If you do want to go the route where it was a dangerous play where it led to an injury, I could understand suspending Perez, but there definitely needs to be something for Xhekaj, because as much as you want to send a message, that just literally crossed the line. Like that was like he basically literally assaulted him in that instance, and something needs to happen there. Like obviously you want to stand up for your teammate. You want to do the right thing. And they were even sending him messages all night. The fans were booing him. Other players are going after him and giving him little shots and everything like that. Fine. You got to accept that what you did, whether it was an intentional or not, you got to accept that. You got to accept the response. But for him to do that, that's just absolutely crossing the line. Like it was just absolutely disgusting. And which is why I said, maybe a knee on knee, maybe that deserves a suspension, maybe it doesn't, but Xhekaj deserves to get some sort of supplemental discipline, because that was absolutely ridiculous of what he did.
Wow. Yeah, no, absolutely it was. And like I said, anybody who's old enough to have been around for the Bertuzzi stuff, like Steve Moore, we all remember what Bertuzzi went through off the ice. I mean, there's a fine line between a hockey play and something that's not even remotely supposed to be around the game. And that was one of those things where it's just like you question why the heck you like what wires crossed for you to grab a guy like around the collar and just punch him right in the head. It just it for me it does not make sense. That said, like I'm not in that situation, so I can't speak for Robert Xhekaj, but I'm sure he sits back and he's probably shit, I probably shouldn't have done that, right? Like post game you look at it and you're like, man, that was a decision I shouldn't have made. That said, I hope everybody's okay. We saw David Reinbacher go down as well. Obviously that's not something you want to see as a Montreal Canadiens fan either. Especially in preseason.
Now. Yeah, it brings up the question now where how many preseason games do you really want to play? Because you're seeing injuries galore right now. You saw what happened with Drew Doughty. You're seeing what happened with Patrick Laine. Like these are big time players that could have significant impacts on their team. They're going to possibly be out long term. I mean, fortunate enough, I mean, we still don't know the update on Reinbacher or Laine. We already know that Doughty's going to be out long term. Matthews, Tavares, Nylander, they're all day to day. But it's like, at what point do you have to minimize the game, start the season earlier so that the regular season can happen where, you're not getting severely injured at this point? So like there needs to possibly be a discussion about that.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting point because it's kind of like a catch-22, right? You can have fewer preseason games, but then at what point do you have your guys in a game situation that maybe they won't extend themselves the same way they would in regular training camp, so they could still come out game 1 or 2 of the season and injure themselves. I thought the same thing.
And still be a little bit rusty too.
Exactly. So you're not getting your best product. You're not getting, maybe the time to play with teammates and get your body used to that game situation. I don't know. I honestly, it's a catch-22. I think either way, it can benefit you and it can also not benefit you. So it's an interesting point to make for sure. And I know the NFL has gone that way. The NBA actually added their in season tournament, which added more games to the schedule. So I mean, I guess it doesn't matter to them because they've got what is it, load management and all that crap that goes on in the always fun NBA. But anyways, that's besides the point. Obviously, it was a heated match last night. I believe they said 63 penalty minutes between the two teams. The two teams open up the regular season. And surely going to be a heated affair, especially if Arbor Xhekaj is back in the lineup. And we all know Pare won't, but Revo certainly will be there, and that'll beg the question if we see a heavyweight matchup in game one of the regular season. Before we close out here, Peter, anything you wanted to say to the listeners?
No, it's just hockey. Hockey's basically back right now. The games are flying. By the time we know it, the regular season's going to start. So let's continue going through preseason. Just get it out of the way because I'm ready for actual meaningful hockey right now. So let's get it.
Well, in talking about the struggles last season, and in line with us here at the hockey podcast network as well. This podcast, as well as the network, is brought to you by BetterHelp. I know we've talked about it a lot. As adults, we don't always have time to add to our plate, to learn new things, to kind of let that childhood mentality be back in our lives. Well, therapy can help you reconnect with your sense of wonder because your back to school era can come at any age. It's not just as a school kid, as I've learned with my son here, starting out his first year of school. Now, I've never used BetterHelp personally, but I have used therapy to get through some roadblocks in my life, and it certainly has benefited me in many ways. I've learned to empower myself. I've learned to set boundaries, and I think that's important for any individual. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists at any time with no additional cost, because it's not always the first one that works out for you. Read curiosity with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/THPN today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/THPN for 10% off. Well, Peter, as you are, I'm super excited to get the season going. It sounds like my little one's pretty excited to get things going as well. So we're gonna get that underway. But anyways, it's gonna be a long season, another 82 games. We're gonna see what the Maple Leafs can do. Hopefully, we see some playoff action this season. Hopefully, we see some second round action this year. But normally we do the divisional breakdowns before the season starts. I think we're gonna see how it flows this year as we get into the last little part of the regulars or the preseason here. But as I mentioned off the top of the show, if you want to get involved with our Goudreau brother donation, please reach out. We'd like to give as much as we can. We'd like to help out wherever we can. So if you want to get involved and you want to join the Sticks in the Six podcast, just let us know. On behalf of the Hockey Podcast Network, DraftKings, BetterHelp, that's another week of Sticks in the Six in the books. Stay tuned for all the fun stuff that we've got coming this season, including the India House. Peter, I'll give you a hint. It looks like we could be going back live in Toronto on game day. So if you're interested, you want to come out, you want to shoot the shit about hockey, talk to the boys, make sure you come out and have a beer. We're gonna be at a new location. We'll keep you posted on all the updates. But until next week, episode 174. That's all we got for Sticks in the Six.